Assalamu alaikum everyone. Hope this finds you all well. Today is going to be our first lecture after yesterday's lecture, which was on just the introduction, and we've given you some tips on the guidelines on how to write an essay report. Today we are going to start very softly, very gently with the topic of epidemiology. We want to understand a little bit more of what the word means and what is the uses of it in hospital and community. And we are going to be covering a set of objectives, which we will have a look at shortly. So again, if you have any questions, any queries, anything that is not that clear, you can always reach me out through my email, and I'll try my best to answer your questions. So let's get started. In today's objectives, the first thing we want to start with is to define public health and what does this word actually means, and then what is the importance of public health in our day-to-day life and as epidemiologists. And then we want to compare between public health and medicine. Is public health similar to medicine, or are they different, and if so, how? And what are the different uses of public health? And then what are the sources of scientific knowledge in public health? How do we make this as a science, and what are the bases behind it? And then we will end today's lecture with a very general slide on the definition of the word epidemiology, but we will not get into the details of it until the coming lecture. So hopefully today's lecture is not going to be a very long one. So we said at the beginning of today's lecture, we want to understand more what is public health. So if we come to define public health, it's a multidisciplinary field that covers different aspects of the population health. And the goal of public health, or that this multidisciplinary field has a goal which is to promote the health of the population, and that through organized community efforts. So here there are two words that are very important and that I would like also probably to highlight. The first one is to promote rather than to treat, and it is the health of the population instead of the health of the individual. And that is through not hospital-based efforts, but through community efforts. So we engage the whole community in our goal of promoting and enhancing the health of the general population. If we come to compare between public health and medicine, medicine focuses on treating illness, certain illness, like flu, like heart problem, like gastric problem, like musculoskeletal problem, and that one problem or one issue or one illness is a number of individuals who come to your health facility, whether that is a health center or a polyclinic or a hospital, because they come to you, those certain individuals, with certain problems, illnesses, so you only focus on treating that in them. But when we come to talk about public health instead focuses on not treating the illness that has already occurred, but on preventing the illness from occurring in the first place. And that prevention is not on individuals. Instead, it is on population living in communities at large. And I hope you can see the difference. Medicine treating, public health preventing. Medicine working on number of individuals, public health working on population and communities. How can public health do that, the prevention on communities? It is through a systematic way of first assessing the health status of the community and finding out the general issues among different group of population. When you're assessing the health status, you can come up with a problem diagnosis. You can diagnose what is the problem out there, and then you are trying to search for the cause and the reason of that problem to be widespread in that community. And then after that, you are trying to control that problem by designing the proper solution that you can work it on these people to solve that issue. So for example, if we assess the health status of the youth in Oman, and we can come up with the issue that is starting to spread, which is, for example, smoking among these generation. So you come and you look for the cause of that. Why do they start doing this harmful act? Because we already know that by smoking down the line in time, they can develop number of health issues, and they will be that will be something bad on their health, and that will be a burden on our health system as well to treat them. So we go back and we see, why do they start smoking? Is the rules and legislations in our country take these selling cigarettes, for example, for the youth very lightly, that we need to control? Do they get that habit by getting affected by the behavior of their friends who start smoking and they don't want to be out of the norm, or somebody who looks odd so they start taking that act? Is that because of the absence of the religious control in the country? Is it because there is nobody who told them that they are not supposed to do so? So we are trying to go and figure out all the different dimensions of the problem, and then we tackle it one by one, and we make it more difficult and more hard for them to start doing this act. Like, we can start with putting certain policy that they cannot buy, for example, cigarettes if they are less than 18 years old. There should be more recommendations or lecturing about how bad, or awareness campaign about how bad these acts. We can shift their attention from being bored or getting into these useless friend gangs to doing something more interesting that will distract their thinking about bad habits, like shifting their energy and their time to exercise instead, to be there certain sanctions or uqubat for people who are taking up this act of smoking in certain public places, to abandon it, or to, if they found out that they are smoking and they're underaged. So these things, when we put it, we are promoting the health of the population, and you can see how we are preventing something, for the illness from occurring earlier on, by focusing all our efforts on the community, because we have discovered that there is, or we have diagnosed that there is a health issue that is threatening them, and we are trying to tackle it, combat it, stop it before it goes on and becomes a public health issue. and concern or problem. So this is a simple example of how public health works compared to medicine. Now we have been talking about public health compared to medicine, but why public health is not that common, why it is not popular, why we don't hear many people talking about it, why are the achievements of public health are not recognized like that in medicine. To be honest, public health has certainly received less attention compared to medicine, and therefore, because of less attention being given to it, it has also received less resources, and it took time to emerge to the surface and be known to people. Maybe now more than decades before, it is more common and is something very important in different populations. But why is that? That is mainly, if we go back to look at the roots of the problem, is that because public health, as we have said, is its main goal is to prevent illness and promote health, it is always very difficult to recognize those people who spared from being sick, or who have been spared from falling ill or from death, compared to people who are getting recovered or who are being sick but treated and then they prevented from dying. Can you see what I mean here? Because it's always easy to count how many people are diseased with cancer, how many people have died from a cardiac arrest, how many people with diabetes who have been prevented from going blind. Because the nature of medicine is to treat the illness, or treat the illness for people to be cured, or treat the illness for people not to ultimately die, right? Because these are the two prognoses of disease. And that can be very well recognized, and you can get it in statistics and in figures very clearly, so you can appreciate how important medicine is. But because public health is acting behind, kind of like behind the scenes, is working on population in general and people who don't end in hospital, who are living in the community but they are making their health better, so they don't fall ill and they don't have to go to hospitals to be treated by people with medicine. So and public health is working silently, and it's very difficult to have figures or statistics about people who are healthy. It is very difficult to get statistics about people who, because of health promotion, did not fall ill, or those who did not fall ill and therefore did not die and they are living happily. So these figures are less of a drastic images that can be touched upon very easily, so you don't hear about them and you feel that they have no role at all. But instead, their role is much more important and vital compared to the role of medicine. For example, if we look at Oman, we don't need to go any farther than that. In Oman, if we compare before 1970 and all the different improvements in people health after the 1970 and so on, it came because of what? It came because actually of public health initiatives and actions. The health expectancy of individuals has gone up. From being like something about 45 years to up to 70 plus years now, and that is mainly because of the availability of clean water compared to how it was before that. It is the improvement in sanitation, in living standards, and that all has reduced all the burden of infectious diseases, which were very common by then, and that was the main reason to kill people and to cause infection, and also for for newborns and children under 5 to die. But the improvements that happened in sanitation, in less water contamination, in vaccination, the introduction of vaccination that helped decrease the number of many infectious diseases, and that has caused either death or disabilities, and the improvement in health services, and further and further, if we look at more advanced public health compared to those days, if we talk about, for example, car accidents, which has spiked at a year or two, and what public health actions has taken place, about the legislation, about how important it is to wear seat belts and not to drive if you are tired, or to make sure that your vehicle is in a good shape before setting off, and making sure that everyone with you is safe enough with seat belt, and the abandon of talking on cell phones or holding the cell phone while driving, and all the fines that they have set for that if it occurred, has helped people be more careful during driving, and be more attentive, and has reduced dramatically the number of car accidents that were killing a big number of our population. And also, if we look at work safety rules that has been introduced in workplaces, and that has also reduced number of injuries and accidents. Fluoriding the water, and that helped to improve the oral hygiene and health of the individuals, giving more attention to pregnancy and pregnant women in terms of the number of care of visits, prenatal visits before delivery, to solve any issues, and improve the health of the mother and the newborn. The introduction of contraception in our community to space out between births, and that also promoted the health of both the mother and the newborn. So all these things are all public health initiatives that are very important, and that has changed our life dramatically. But we have to give attention to outside the buildings of the hospital to be able to see it and feel its effect. All right. So, coming to talk about what are the different sources of knowledge. If we say that public health is a science, is a real science, that has received less attention in the past years, then how it is a science? Where do they get the knowledge from to have all these actions and these initiatives? Well, that is what we are going to introduce in this slide. So there are three different main sources of knowledge or of science where we get enough information to be able to act with our public health campaigns or initiatives to promote health. The first one is the level 1, which we call it as the basic science. The basic science gives us a lot of information in public health that we require to do what we do. And when we talk about basic science, in simple words, we mean the science that is being given to us, or that the knowledge that we get out of laboratories on different in different domains, like in pathology, in toxicology, in genetics, but that all we get it by working on cells, on tissues, on samples, to look at things, and that helps us more to understand the pathophysiology of diseases and how it works and how it emerges in population, different risk factors that makes it happen or worse. And if we look at basic science, usually when you work on tissues, on cells, it's more of experimental stage to understand certain health problems, and usually it's being done on animals, particularly on mice. as you know. And these mice are being all grown up in the lab. They're being all exposed to same risk factors, same genetic makeup, in a very controlled environment of what they eat, what is their routine. And if you are doing an experiment to test something as a prognosis of a certain disease, or how it will make a disease appear or no, you will divide those group of mice in the lab into two groups. For example, one group you will give that exposure or that medicine if you are testing the effectiveness of a certain medicine or vaccine, and the other group will not receive that. And other than that, the two groups are similar in everything else, genetically, environmentally. The only difference will be what you are testing and what you are giving to one group and you're not giving to the other group. So it is very easy to come up with conclusions. However, the shortcoming, so it will give us very good conclusions about what you are studying and very definitive answer about that and good knowledge about that. However, the knowledge that you are getting cannot be attributed to the general population, the real life, because although we can get exposed to different things in our life, like for example say smoking or radiation, we don't get it in a same fixed dose way you test it in laboratories on mice. And people are different genetically, and people are different environmentally in what else they are doing, and then can work along with different risk factors or different exposures to make a disease happen, or the pathophysiology of disease to progress, to go bad or to be better. So it is not quite similar to real life, but it gives us some good information that we need to understand more diseases, to be able to prevent it. Okay, so this is about the basic science. Second thing, we are going to talk about the second source of the scientific knowledge in public health is through the clinical science or the clinical practice. Clinical practice is generally what happens in the hospitals, in clinics, between doctors and patients. So now we came out of the anatomic level, from lab tissues and cells to more of individual, and we are looking at different domains: OB/GYN, pediatric medicine, emergency medicine, internal medicine, and all these different specialties in medicine, and how individuals do present to the healthcare in terms of symptoms and signs. And what do these tell us about people's diseases, how we diagnose them, what tests we do to help us diagnose, to understand more certain group of signs and symptoms, and what diagnosis is most likely to give us. This knowledge, we all got it from the clinical practice, and a very good, and that of course by now we know most of them, but if you look how they all already started, it started by observation of doctors to patients with certain symptoms and signs, and running for them certain tests and finding certain findings and putting that together to come up with a certain diagnosis. And after the diagnosis, it comes the stage of trying different treatments and seeing what works best for them, and that would be the norm nowadays to how to treat that condition, and what things we know, if it was present or no, what will make it worse, the prognosis, how the disease develops, and what will make it cured or stop it or make it better, and what might lead to death out of that, and what might prevent it. But that knowledge, how it started, it's all by observation and reporting. And a very good example of the second source of knowledge is a good example is about HIV. HIV, when it first emerged in the United States in 1981, how they came to know about this infection was a good story to tell here, as a part of how this is observation can give you good information about new diseases. So they found a group of male individuals coming with two coming up with two diseases. The first disease is what's called pneumonia, but that pneumonia was not like the pneumonia that they normally would see by then among different communities. They were coming with pneumonia caused by an organism called Pneumocystis carini. And Pneumocystis carini pneumonia was previously only occurring among immunocompromised individuals, and not young males who are thought to be healthy and not having any other diseases and not considered to be immunocompromised. They were also seeing that these male individuals who are young were also being diagnosed with a malignancy called Kaposi sarcoma. And Kaposi sarcoma was a malignancy that was common among elderly individuals and not again among this group. So this was two strange new findings, not new in a sense of they did not know about them, new in a sense of occurring in a young male population, and that observation, putting them together and going and investigating more, eventually led them to the disease called AIDS, and they started to know more about its causes and why it was common among those individuals who were more found to be homosexual, having homosexual behavior, and were drug users. And they knew that this virus that caused this disease were getting transmitted by these acts, and that virus was the cause of these individuals to be immunocompromised and to have these unexpected diseases among this young group of individuals. So, and that how do we come to know about new diseases is about something called case reports. So you see one case report and you think that this is different than what we know, and then you find another case, so there will be case series and you report to those, and those are the basis of how we come to know about new diseases. And a very good example of that nowadays is the pandemic that we are all in since months, and how it all started in China from reporting those few cases that has emerged, and from there they knew that we are dealing with something new, with a new virus called so and so, and it causes so and so, and things went off from there. So these case reporting is always through the clinical practice, and here comes the importance of this source in public health. We will talk more about case reporting in the coming lectures as one of the first bases of studying about different diseases in epidemiology. And then we are coming to the last source of knowledge in public health, and that is through the public health science. What do we mean by public health science? It is the epidemiology, it is the environmental health science, it is the health education and behavioral science, and what all that can give us from different information that will help us also act on public health initiatives. What do you mean by that? For example, in a campaign that scientists were looking at lead-free kits. Lead is one of the metal that can be contaminating soil, or can contaminate different objects that children play with, especially in some of their toys, if you heard about it. So they were trying to go and determine the impact of removing this lead from the environment where children live, like from their soil, and getting the lead levels in their blood, and to see the effect of that. And then that was one of the campaigns where they have taken up that action to eliminate the risks of lead poisoning, and that was targeted in one of the projects, and they saw a lot of improvement in their health, and they were able to relate that poisoning to different diseases in these individuals. And only through such campaigns, that at the level of people's environment or behavior, or starting certain health education and checking how it will affect positively on people health, and studying that effect is also the third and last source of knowledge, and it can be also one of the very important ones in public health. So all that, talking about public health, the science that we use to get all this information from is called epidemiology. So epidemiology is like the science where from we can act on public health with. So what is epidemiology if we come to look at this word, and if we want to break it down? So if you look at the word epidemiology, epidemiology is coming from a Greek word, and if we cut it down to its components, we can see that the phrase epi means upon, and the component demo means the common people or the general population, and logy, I'm sure you're all familiar with logy, like sociology, biology, and so on, and that always means it is a study. So it means a study of something that is upon the population. You're always looking and studying things, but related mainly to the health of the population. So if we come to look at the definition, it says that it is a study of different components, and these 5 words are very important for you to understand. As I said, in today's lecture we are going to touch upon it very quickly, but in the coming lectures we are going to talk in details about these words and what does it mean. And it's very important for you to have a good understanding of each word of these, and we also are going to have a tutorial session where we can also have more of thinking about this word and how it's being used. So it is again defined as the study of the distribution, so you're looking where this disease is, and the determinants, what causes it, and the frequency of the disease, how common it is, where in human populations and not individuals again. And you apply this study when you go and study and analyze what disease is there, where is it in the world, what are the possible causes of its emergence, how frequent, among which group of individuals it is being spread, and you're using all this knowledge that you got to control the health problem eventually, because your main goal is to control it or prevent it, yeah, from spreading or from getting worse. And when we always use the word of epidemiology in this study, because you're always analyzing and trying to find out what health issues and problems are out there, you have always to have something called hypothesis, and that what takes us to the word hypothesis and how it is linked to the word epidemiology. Because you have to have a certain explanation of why things are happening, and only because you have that certain explanation, it doesn't mean it's wrong, it doesn't mean it's right, but you have to test it to prove it or reject it to be able to act upon your public health action to control that problem. We can't just go out there and try testing everything. Like the example I gave on smoking among youth individuals in Oman, why it started to the numbers to climb up about smokers. Is it trending because they feel it's cool? Is social media playing a role in that? Is the cigarette selling companies are giving tempting offers to our youth? Is there something hidden that we don't know about? So unless you have these certain explanations in your mind, that's what we call hypotheses. You go and test it, and we can talk about that in the coming lectures. How do you test your hypothesis to prove whether what you thought about was right or wrong? If it is right, then you act upon it and you can start working on it to control the problem. If it's found to be wrong, then you have to find another hypothesis, and that is how it has been all over the past decades in trying to understand diseases and to control it and to prevent it. And that was the basis of all the knowledge that we have nowadays in medicine. It started all like this, and it continues to go like this as well. So a hypothesis is a tentative explanation. It's your attempt to put an explanation for a certain observation of phenomena or health problem or scientific problem. But that explanation should be able to be tested by doing further tests, investigations, studies, and to whether to prove it or reject it. Only then you can use it to control your health problem or the issue that you are working on. Okay, so this is very general. We will get into more details of all of this in the coming lectures. I hope that gave you a simple glimpse about public health and the science behind it, which is epidemiology, and how they are linked together. And this is a good start for you from here to know more about epidemiology and public health. So this is the end of today's lecture, and I'll be talking to you in the coming lecture. And for now, bye-bye.